Hey everyone, I am thrilled to have Chris Kohler with me. Chris is the CMO at Box currently. We also were colleagues at Adobe for quite some time. I worked a lot with Chris's team and was glad to connect with him and be able to get him on the episode today. Chris has a great background in marketing, customer success, and really just engaging with customers. Would love to kind of have him take a minute to introduce himself and give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. As you said, I'm currently the CMO of Box. Been at Box about 2 years after spending many a year at Adobe, 10 years at Adobe proper, and prior to that, Omniture. And so has spent the last 15 plus years in this space, both as a practitioner, but also advising a lot of companies around what modern marketing looks like. So yeah, in a lot of different roles. So I'm a unique background, not your traditional, have come up only through the marketing ranks, but I've been in customer success and run product and been in pre-sales. So I really think about that customer experience and the role of marketing through the entire customer lifecycle. But thanks for having me. It's great to reconnect.
Absolutely. Yeah. At Adobe, it was always you were part of, and me and you were part of kind of the movement towards customer experience and kind of doubling down on customer experience is even more than important than product is something then Shantanu always said. What do you kind of see as the modern workplace, both inside at Box and then also, facing customers and kind of connecting with customers on an experience level and marketing level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's shifting a lot for B2B companies as well, right? Where I think traditionally you were seeing you'd create a product and you say, hey, here's what it is, and product features were like the core of this. But as more and more enterprises are thinking about this, it's really now about what is that customer experience? How do I facilitate a journey that makes us really, really easy to use? Just like in your personal life, any of your consumer apps, you want to have that same level of experience with the products. And so this idea of sort of the commercial consumer B2B is really critical. And so the way that we think a lot about it is really from end to end, both from a product experience. How do you think about the CS and making sure they're successful with the product? But also, are we talking and marketing to these folks and creating experiences that they want to engage with the brand? And so I do believe, this notion of Adobe talked a lot about changing the world through digital experiences. We talk a lot about, right, how do we empower sort of the next modern generation? How do we make sure that that employees can be as productive and have access to all of their content, regardless of what systems they're using? To really drive efficiency and employee experience. So it is all about experiences now. It's not just about products and features is how we think about it.
It's really important. And I think as you kind of dive into a certain group, what is a way that let's say you enters with like a customer support team. How are you kind of trying to connect with other teams, once say you spider into Adobe's customer support team, they're your first customer. How do you kind of expand, to other groups and make sure your marketing's kind of hitting on with other groups as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're actually doing a lot. One of the challenges, and I took over the CMO role about a year ago, and we're still working through this, is what does that sort of self-service experience look like? And from when I enter the website into, our product is so tightly coupled with our website because it is, obviously a SaaS app.
Right.
But we had separate community applications. We've got a separate support experience, and so we're doing a lot of work around how do you make that sort of seamless experience that says, if they're on the website, can they quickly find what they need? If they're in product, how do they find the information they need? If they've got questions, how do you make that as easy as possible to get answers to that? And it's not just around the human experience, but also how do you create that self-service? Because people don't necessarily want to interrupt what they're doing, and they just want to find the answers to it. And whether they talk to a human, they talk to some sort of, we're looking at chatbot technology that allows them to interact and really get real-time answers to this. So for us, we've spun up a huge project around just self-service in general. right? Whether that is, I want to buy something digitally, and I want to be able to do that without maybe not interacting with a sales team. And so we have to create that experience. In the same way as I want to be able to find the information that I need, whether it's how do I implement or a new integration that you've got? How do I actually do this task or set up this workflow? Our customers are saying this needs to be as seamless as possible. So a lot of what we're thinking about is how do we leverage technology with humans as the overlay on top of that. So it's additive and they work in conjunction together. So that's sort of our approach to this as well.
Yeah, you know better than anyone, having done customer success so much, that probably the majority of people are searching online for an answer first. And by the time they get to you on Twitter or your customer support line or your sales, they're probably pretty fired up that they haven't been able to find an answer, and they're ready for a quick response. What's kind of a way that you're trying to help that with self-serve? Is that improving knowledge base, just kind of training early on?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. One, we're doing a lot of surveys just to understand, as people come to the site, are they finding what they're looking for? And we definitely are making changes based on some of that data. But you're right. If they're getting to the support line, they've already tried to figure this out, probably through multiple channels, and then they're frustrated because they can't get access to it. We're actually going through a whole project of revamping our knowledge base. We're going to rethink the community site, and how do you actually long-term build a community that other customers can bounce ideas and thoughts off, not just from a technical perspective, but I think there's a lot of sort of interest around best practices. And so in this world where everyone's working from home, and you don't have as much, over the shoulder conversations, a lot of people are just asking like, hey, how can I find out from my network, from my peers, like, what are they doing? And so there's a lot of this that I think we could be doing a better job of long term. But I do think the self-service experience is going to be important moving forward.
We did a survey at Cloud App last fall on remote work, and we looked at younger generations, older generations, and kind of wanted to understand what the trends were like there. And more than 50% of Gen Z and millennials listed that they were working remotely the majority of the time. Obviously, that's like almost 100% of the time right now for a lot of at least office workers. But how do you think these conditions have accelerated things? And maybe, take us in. Box has a lot of employees. How did you guys kind of shift things from, having all these people come into the office to suddenly remote over, a week span?
Yeah, it was. Luckily, we're sort of a cloud first enterprise across everything that we, every tool set that we have. So it was a bit easier for us than probably most. But we did. I would describe. We had a work from home. We had a healthy office culture, and we had hubs across the globe, and we spent a lot of time sort of building those experiences and and all the amenities that a Silicon Valley company has to provide to compete. But we had folks that were working remotely, but it was like maybe a day a week and sometimes 2 days a week. So we were already set up for that. But it is a very different environment when literally every employee, when we make the decision, we say, hey, this is we're realizing what's going on here. We actually have to pivot, and now we're going to close the offices, and globally everyone's going to work from home. Luckily, we had the tools already in place. We're Slack and a Zoom customer and Okta, and we partner with them closely. We're a 365 shop. So again, we already had all the tools in place.
Yep.
But there were a lot of like norms that changed as well, right? How do you make sure you keep that cultural aspect of the company intact? How do you make sure your teams are in touch? There's no more of, as I described, the over the shoulder, the water cooler conversations and all that. So we spent a lot of time not just making sure that the people had the tools in place, but what are the new norms that we have to establish? What are the stand-ups we're going to do to make sure that people can understand what the priorities are and the communication is there. How do you create the culture? One thing that we pivoted as a company really quickly is we always did this Friday lunch in our headquarters in Redwood City.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were in the office, people went and ate lunch and heard the presentations, but you didn't necessarily have a lot of global participation, just because it felt awkward, because you were listening in on a huge cafeteria, and it was hard to hear.
Yeah.
We flipped that to a fully virtual, and now we have like the participation across the company is amazing. We have more than 50%, 60% of the company every Friday on a call, hearing what's the strategy of the company, what's working, what's not. We've had guest speakers, we've had fun entertainment. We have a lot of really cool M&E customers, so we've had some celebrities come in and do some fun, a song here or there. So I think the important piece is like, how have we kept the culture going very, very quickly? And that's been sort of our internal view. And then, obviously externally, we did a lot around customers and how we're thinking through that too.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like the digital transformation talk was pretty thick at Adobe, obviously, and Microsoft and Oracle and Salesforce were all pushing it pretty hard. 7 years of conversations spanned into 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to kind of see when it comes back to a hybrid of some people in the office, some people decide to stay remote, like what that looks like. Because to your point, like Adobe tried to connect the offices all the time. Like there were those cameras in San Jose that linked to Lehigh, and you could like walk past them and try and say hi to people. But it always felt a little awkward. Like it never felt super authentic. And it was probably a lot because we weren't used to that type of experience. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes out of this.
Well, and I think, I think what works really well, and one of the things that we're noticing, one, I mean, employee productivity has gone up, and we don't know if that's just because people are working longer hours and working more. Like that's, something, as we're in this sort of sprint, and is that something we can maintain that momentum, long term is a big question I think we all are grappling with. But when it's equal when everyone has their own screen. And, I think the mixed environment is something that we're noticing, is when you have, say, 10 people in a conference room and 5 people on, video conference, it's just really hard to feel like you're connected. But when everyone has their own screen, you can look at everyone, you can engage with everyone. I think that's the equalizer that I think is allowed for the productivity to happen and feel like you're connected with people. Video is obviously super key to that. Whether it's asynchronous or live, I think having that connection with people in the video is what people are craving. So I'm not sure how you maintain this when you do have people that do want to go in the office.
Yep.
There's going to be a cohort of people, like whether they enjoy an office environment or their workspaces are just not conducive to working from home. They might have roommates or small apartments or other things. So we're not sure what the future is going to look like, but we do believe there will be some sort of hybrid, as you described.
Yeah, we saw a big, you mentioned, video being a key part of that. Like we saw a big spike in async, Cloud App is a screen recording tool. You can have your face in the corner and record your screen talking to a document or whatever. We saw spikes in work behavior, like 3x increase during the former morning commute time, almost a 4x increase in after hours. And also executives were like the highest usage growth was like 4 to 5x. So like more communication between executives and their teams, or managers and their teams, making sure they're staying connected when they can't necessarily do a Zoom call.
Yeah, I think that the key piece is because you don't have people traveling as much as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's also a lot of access, right? We're seeing that both with customers. We're seeing that internally, like as our leadership, we're probably communicating and engaging more now than we ever did for, the years prior, because we're all available. Like, people aren't in different, on different continents. They're not traveling. And so we connect, actually, I think probably 2 to 3x times more
Cool.
now. And so we're from a strategy perspective, we're more aligned than we ever have been. And it's the same thing with my leadership team, across the marketing organization. We started doing daily stand-ups, but then it was like, okay, now this is maybe overkill. But we meet a couple times a week. We're just constantly connected. And the ironic part of this is, a lot of us feel as connected, if not more, although we haven't actually seen anyone in person, than we did when we were all sort of passing each other in the hallway from conference room to conference room, and engaging for 30 seconds as we walked past each other. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation right here is a perfect example. Like, to get, a CMO of a, growing startup to kind of join in like 2 weeks or like 10 days.
Yeah.
That's insane, right? There would have been you may have been traveling, or you would have had more meetings, or something would have had to get rescheduled. This is exactly like a key piece of something that wouldn't have happened back in like February, at least so quickly.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting, especially early on, and we're trying to maintain this, that the number of meetings in the beginning actually dropped pretty quickly, because it was like, you have to be laser focused on what are the priorities, what do we need to get done, so we had a lot of examples where we could actually get stuff done via Slack and say, hey, can we make a decision, quickly on this? Let's chat about this, and let's not have another meeting.
Yeah.
I think those norms are so hard to break, and we are starting to be like, hey, let's get on a call and a video and do this. And there's examples where I think we just naturally have to say, do we need to get on another call to answer this, or can we just do this in a way? So that's the other thing where, habits are hard to break. And so that's what we're trying to do with this new medium.
So my story of when I started switching and eliminating meetings at Adobe was as managing some resources in India, and also had some people in APAC, Singapore and UK. And so it was like really funky time zones, right? Like 12 hours exactly for India. Nobody's really happy at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. on a phone call.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's when I first discovered, kind of like async video was like, let's cut this like 45-minute call, and I'll just send you guys a quick video of me, talking to the project or whatever. And then you can respond with video when you're able to. And it created this great connection. And then also, I don't know if you knew Maria Poveromo very well over at Adobe, but she was my VP for a while. And I started sending her videos of updates, and she's like, this is great. I get like 15 of these update emails every Monday, and I don't really watch the video piece, but I listen to it in my AirPods, walking into the office from my car, and I can get the quick update versus having to read, 40 emails on your team's updates. So there's really some nice advantages to finding different ways to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting too is just from an international perspective. I would typically do 6 times a year to London, and several times a year to Tokyo. But now I'm speaking with with the European teams 2 to 3, 4 times a week.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like, I'm not commuting, I'm not in the car. Hey, you want to do a quick video at 8 a.m.? Sure. Let's do and get on. Or we do an all hands call with me every 2 weeks at 7 a.m. on Monday.
Yep.
Well, I typically would have been commuting in, and now I can be on video and sync with them. So
yeah, that's great.
It is. There are benefits to not doing the commute. And then the other thing with APAC teams, I'm willing to, like, I do a trade-off of having lunch with my kids, and then doing an 8 o'clock, 30-minute video with the Tokyo team. Like, I'll take that trade-off all day.
Totally.
Right.
Absolutely. So what are some kind of tips and tricks you've learned as a leader? First of all, like, we're all working from home during a pandemic. This is not necessarily what remote work normally looks like. But what are some tips you've learned? You mentioned some daily stand-ups that, change to weekly or whatever, but some connection points, collaboration points that you've learned as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few as we've evolved and over very very quickly in the last 3 months in times of crisis, right? Communication is key, right? And communication in general as a leader is like critically important, but in a time when there's so much uncertainty, there's so much worry and stress in the system. You have to just over communicate. So we've done that a lot. So whether that is sort of ongoing, I send out comms every week, like here are the priorities, here's what we're doing. We've done a lot of all hands calls. We've done a lot of, ask me anythings, like literally over communicate is probably been the number one thing. And we're doing that both at a company, but also within the marketing organization. I think another point is just having empathy. Both for employees and customers. This is like you described, is a very unusual time. And it isn't like normal work from home or remote work. A lot of people are dealing with, stress or family members that are sick. A lot of people have kids that are at home that they're trying to homeschool at the same time of doing their day jobs. And you just have to give that empathy and flexibility and understand. And I think that the time shifting, like you described, we see it happen a lot as well. Yep. Where people are, I've got folks on my team, 2 working parents, younger kids that can't just be self-directed, yep. for, hours at a time. And so they'll do things like a shift, like, hey, from 9 to 11, I'm offline. I got to go. I'm working with, I'm on, kid duty, helping them for 2 hours. And you're like, great. Okay. Block it off your schedule. I know that you'll do something, we can connect later at night, or you do it in the morning. So I think that's been critically important, as making sure people have the time and flexibility to deal with this. This pandemic is challenging. I think the other thing that we spent a lot of time on is getting focused. And what are the priorities in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty? You just have to be crystal clear on what are the priorities that we need to focus on right now. Because also what happens, and this happened a lot when we were responding to this. So all of a sudden we're like, hey, how do we just make sure that our customers are okay? Yep. And we did a lot of programs around free offers, like turning off overages, really you're creating experiences and helping them in any way possible. So I think that was another key piece of this is customers matter, no matter what right now. Let's stay focused on helping them, and let's put things into place. And we've gotten a lot of, tremendous feedback of, from our customers in this time, that we actually care, and it's part of our core values. So I think that that is critically important as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's so important, because it does, if you don't focus on that, like all of us as businesses, there's such a snowball effect. Like if, you have your 10 biggest customers at Box churn, then you guys have to churn from other tools and to save your money. And then it just creates this massive, SaaS snowball. So if we all kind of focus on preventing churn, giving leniency, giving empathy, I think that's, so crucial. Really good point.
Yeah. And I think for us too is simplicity of messaging is what we focused on too. Obviously flipping, we had a pretty healthy field marketing, organization, and doing a ton of activities.
Sure.
We spend a lot of time repivoting that, but we also spent a bunch of time rethinking the messaging and simplifying it, because when you start to think about, a way I would describe it is someone's hierarchy of needs from a business perspective, it isn't, these complex, use cases, like that all goes out the door. And all of a sudden you get down to, okay, do I have access to my content? Can I chat? Can I video? Like, how do I actually do my job? So we spent a lot of time, like, how do we get to simplicity and making sure that we can help customers? I think the next phase of this and you described it as this notion of digital transformation. Everyone's been talking about that for so long. I think it's going to be, how do you accelerate business processes? What does, you're going to have this mixed environment for some period of time, if not forever. But how do you start to think about, how do you digitize the processes within your business that became very clear that were bottlenecks for your productivity as a business, not just about employees?
Yeah, that's really smart. You have that, you have when all the costs go up to the CFO and he's like, hey, what's this, box line item? You need the team to be able to quickly say, including the CFO, like, oh, that's an essential business. We need that for this, and this. I think it's really smart.
Well, and we saw it like quite a bit as well, where I think there was a period of time where a portion of an organization might work from home, right? There might be departments that kind of, that have more flexibility. Obviously, if you're in a sales organization or a CS organization, you're going to have a lot more work from home stuff that you see. But what we're seeing is like departments that didn't necessarily ever work from home, whether that's an accounting organization or that is, an engineering organization. Now, all of a sudden, they're all working from home. And then, a lot of questions like in engineering is, can you have engineers work from home and still drive and be productive and everything else? And what we're finding is yes, the answer is yes. And so how do you actually provide the tools for them long term? They're not going to work from home forever, but they might say, I was so productive, I won't want to work from home for 3 days a week. And we'll have collaboration in the office for 2 days. So now it's not like a niche thing that only some people need it. It's like everyone in the organization needs access to this. And what does that flexible model look like to make sure that people can do their jobs?
It's really smart. Chris, it's been a fun conversation. Great to reconnect with you. I have one more question. Want you to look into your crystal ball and kind of make some predictions on what you think both the modern workplace looks like and also how marketing is kind of fitting into the next few years.
Yeah, so I think, from what does the modern workplace look like? I think we will have some hybrid environment. I don't think the office environments of years past will be the same. I think what will end up happening is you almost have to have these as collaboration hubs where people can go in and they might go into the office a couple of days a week and they'll collaborate and they'll get that human interaction. And it's almost, the way I keep describing it is like, it's almost like a lounge where not everyone has like an assigned desk or whatever. You'll go in and you'll have access to a cool environment that you can go and collaborate with people. And you might actually have like Zoom pods or WebEx pods or whatever, where, you can go in and work, and have an environment where it's to your own. So I think there's just employees. I mean, you already said it with sort of the Gen Z of feeling comfortable working from home. I think employees are just going to demand this because it's opening up all sorts of options for them. And so I think this is the new modern workplace, is going to be this hybrid environment. But I think the corporate, those companies that go back to a corporate environment are going to be at a disadvantage versus those that are allowing the flexibility of the future. I don't know that it's going to be everyone is working from their house and that we don't have offices anymore. I don't think we believe that's what'll happen, but we think it'll be some hybrid. Is sort of my guess of what that looks like. Yeah,
I would agree. I think there's a big opportunity to just kind of support that growth, and it could be a generational shift. But certainly, like, it doesn't change. The people like to go to their Googleplex and get their dry cleaning and go to the gym and do everything they need to do, and that can just be kind of a creative hub or a collaborative hub, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and then I think from a marketing perspective, obviously one that we've been talking about for a very long time is just digital. And I think what's really interesting, and I think what us as marketers have to think through is when you start to put on these digital events, what does that evolve into? And obviously we do major conferences. It's very, very expensive. Not doing that obviously for this year and likely next year as well. But then the big question is, do big conferences come back? And it's their millions of dollars to run these things. Can you replicate that experience in a digital environment? Can you ultimately create that digital experience as we described, that morphs sort of your traditional in-person, out of home advertising, all of that? Does digital replace this and accelerate even faster? I think that's the question we're all trying to work through. And then when does the fatigue set in? And so how do you differentiate that digital experience? And I think just a lot of new companies focus on whether that's event platforms or engagement platforms or whatever this is, to really replicate that person-to-person, in-person, small collaboration in a way that you can foster that, but everyone can do that from a different location.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I as things were unfolding, I kept telling our CEO, he's like, "Oh, look at all these conferences are starting to cancel." And I said, I'd be, ultimately shocked if Summit ever got canceled. Like I know how much pipeline is driven at those events, and obviously it and everything else got canceled. Maybe it turns into like a more regionalized smaller conferences, like you mentioned, where you can get together with customers and send out your sales teams and do some, experiences for people that are using the product. But it's like not the 100,000 people at Dreamforce type deal.
Yeah, and I think what could be an interesting model is you'll have like regional gatherings that are part of the global digital event.
Yeah.
So it might be this interesting hybrid cool where you can imagine like hubs all over the US or in EMEA watching main stage, but being together, and then breakouts in person. But again, the facilitation of that, like what's the platform?
Heavy.
It is heavy and hard. And I don't know that anyone's figured that out yet.
Yeah.
But a cool market opportunity for some folks.
It's really great, Chris. Thank you again for your time today. And everyone check out Box. I'm a big fan, have been for a long time. Great company, great product, and great leader in Chris.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate the time, and thanks, and good luck. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, man.
All right. Cheers.